Welcome to the first tutorial video for virtual reality SE3VR11. Today's tutorial is going to look at Coursework 1 and how you can complete it. So first things first, go ahead and fire up Unity. This will take a couple of seconds depending on the computer you're on. Also, if you've just installed it for the first time, you should be prompted with a user login screen connecting to the license server. So the settings you're going to do here, you're going to activate the free version of Unity. Quite simple, and you're going to hit OK. Simple as that. If you activate the 30-day trial of Unity Pro, it'll give you access to more advanced features, but as soon as the 30 days run out, you're suddenly going to be locked out of these features. So we're going to use the free version of Unity, and you're going to do this in the labs as well. Now it's going to ask you to log in. Now what you can do is down the bottom here is create account. The reason you need to do this is so that you can get access to the support forums as well as the Unity Asset Store. Once you have a login though, you'll be able to just log in here. And you probably don't want to get Unity news. So what we'll then do is it will check that your account is available, and then you just hit start using Unity. Now the first time you open Unity, you'll be prompted with this open project box or create new project. If you're wanting to get to this box at any time in the future, hold down the Alt key when loading Unity. It's a magic button, it gets you access to this screen. Otherwise, if you open Unity, it will always open with your previous project. So in this case, we're going to create a new project. We're going to hit Browse, and in this case we've got our My Documents folder and Unity projects, and you get a demo project which comes installed, but we're just going to create a new folder called Coursework 1, which is going to store all of the project data. So once we're in the folder, just hit select folder, leave these all as default. You're going to be creating a 3D scene, and then just hit create. Now depending on your computer, this can take a couple of seconds. It could take about 30 seconds, it depends on the machine you're on. I'm on quite an old machine, so it may take a little while. Now what you can see, depending on your install of Windows, you might lose the title bar. Just hover over it and then tell it to maximize. That way you get your title bar back, because you're also going to need access to these buttons up here. So this is the default Unity layout. You have a big scene view in the middle. You also have your game view on a tab here. You've got your hierarchy on the left, your project settings and console down the bottom, and Spectre on the right. Now it's up to you which layout you use. I personally prefer selecting from this bottom in the right, top right, the 2x3 layout, which gives you a scene view and a game view side by side, one on top of each other, which allows much easier navigation and placement of objects. You then got your world hierarchy in the middle here. I prefer to have this as a single column. It's again up to you completely. Just click the drop down, one column layout, just makes more sense to me. And then there's an inspector as well, which we'll go into in a couple of seconds. So once you're happy with the layout of the interface, the first thing we're going to do is start creating some objects. So your coursework states your Unity project must show a plane with 3 basic objects above it. So let's go ahead and look at the interface. So here we have our scene view. You're holding down your scroll wheel, you're able to pan, go up and down, left and right, and then zoom in and out using the scroll wheel. You can also rotate the view by holding down your right mouse button and moving the view. And depending on your view, you may find that by clicking in the center here, currently we're in perspective mode. If we go to isometric mode, it just changes the view, might make it a little easier. It's all personal preference. You're also able to click on any of these triads. So if you want to view from the top, click Y, from the side, X, from the front, Z. But again, it's totally up to you how you set it up. Now, if you have a look in your hierarchy, all Unity projects always start with the main camera. If you were to double click on this, you'll see that it highlights and takes you directly to the main camera within the scene. But the camera needs something to actually render, so we're going to go ahead and select game object from the top here. We're going to go to create other, and we're going to create a plane. So you can see all of these prefabs here. We're just going to select a plane, and you see now we have a plane that's just decided to set itself up. Because we last had the main camera selected, it's actually put it at 0, 1 in Y and -10 in Z, which is where the camera is positioned. So I'm just going to go ahead and return that back to 0. Now if you have a look in your main view, so again rotating around, just depending on which type of view you want to look at. There's your main camera, and this is the camera's preview, but you can also see it reflecting in real time in the game window. So we have our plane in. Now we also want 3 objects, so I'm going to repeat the process that we used to create the plane. So game object, create other, we're going to have a cube. Game object, create other, we're going to have a sphere. And game object, create other, we're going to have a capsule. So what we now have, you can see them, they're all here in the window. They're all grey at the moment, which is pretty damn boring, but we're going to start moving things around. So let's put the cube back here, so you can grab these direction handles, move them around, or you can grab any of the squares inside to move in those 2 specific planes. So we're going to dump that over there. I think that looks quite good right there. And we're going to move our sphere up, and we're going to bring it across to the right hand side. I think there's good. And the capsule, now what I did there, you can either click in the hierarchy to select an object, or you can click directly in the scene view. So I think the capsule we're going to move to the back, somewhere over there I think. Now, again, pretty basic, but you're asked in the coursework to show some form of manipulation. So let's click on this cube. Maybe we want to rotate this cube. So currently we have move tool selected, but if we go to this one, this allows us to rotate. So we can grab this and actually rotate around axes. And if you have a look in the game view, you can see it's updating in real time as we rotate the object. And there we go. Now, that's all fine and well, but what about the circle or the sphere? We can't really rotate that because it's always going to look exactly the same. But if we come along to this end tool, this is our scale tool. What I'm going to do, I'm going to make ourselves a nice flying saucer shape just by stretching these 2 axes. So there we go. Nice flying saucer. And then this one over here, well, we could rotate it, but rather than using this free rotate, we're going to come over to our inspector, and we're going to change the rotation there to -90, and I think we'll put it put it 90 around in Z, so it's side on. So there we go. That's very simple transformation. So position, rotation, and then if we click on the circle, you can see the scale there as well. So there's our scene. Not very interesting. Tell you what, let's scale that up by a factor of 2, so make twice the size. There we go. Not very interesting scene at the moment. Well, you're asked to also colour some of the images. Now, before we head on to colour, let's just make this hierarchy a bit cleaner. So at the moment, you see everything is just listed in the hierarchy. But if we go to game object and create empty, we get an empty game object. Now we can call this whatever we want to call it. You can either click on it once or hit F2. Let's call this objects. And what we're going to do, we're going to select the cube, sphere and capsule, hold down shift or control, whichever you prefer, and drag them onto objects. And what you can see now is they have become children of objects. And it means that we can literally select the objects and move them all at once. Now they're grouped. And hierarchy is very useful for cleaning up your scene graph, and this is known as your scene graph in virtual reality. So let's make some colours. So in the project folder, what we're going to do is we're going to right click and create a folder, and we're going to call this materials. Apologies for any spelling mistakes. And what we're going to do is then right click on materials, go to create, and we're going to go to material. Nice and simple. And let's call this red dull. So we're going to make a dull red material. Now down in here you can see a preview of what the material is going to look like. At the moment it's white. Because we're wanting it to be dull, we're going to use diffuse, but we're going to have it red. So we click on this box here, select red, and there you can see a nice red sphere. And all we're going to do is drag and drop that. I think you can drop it onto any object, but let's drop it onto the cube. And you can see the colour is reflected in the game as well. So let's repeat that process. Right click on materials, create new material, green shiny. And you guessed it, we're going to make it green. But the question is, how do we make it shiny? At the moment, it is just green. If we come to our shader, rather than being diffuse, let's select specular. And what you'll see now is we can start changing how this appears. So in our case, we've got a blue sky. Let's grab a nice blue specular reflection, and we can change our shininess value, which means we can change how shiny the object is. So the higher that is, the shinier it is. So let's put it about halfway. We're going to drag that onto our cylinder there. So you can start to see flat texture and start a bit of a shine on this one. But you've been asked to create a transparent one. So let's call this blue transparent. Apologies again for any spelling mistakes. Now this one, rather than using diffuse or specular, what we're going to do is we're going to come down to transparent, and I think this time we're going to have a slightly shiny transparent object. So we're going to select specular from the transparent menu, so you can see it's a specular transparent, and we're going to call it blue because that's what we wanted. So we'll have a nice blue color, and in our specular color, again, because we've got a blue sky, let's just imagine, there we go, nice and shiny, and yeah, that's about right there. And we'll just drag that onto the sphere, I think. But here you see a problem. In the game view, you can't see the green capsule through the blue cylinder, sphere. So what you have to do, come back to your main color, click on here, and where you have your red, green and blue channels, you also have an alpha channel. And if we start decreasing this, you can see that this sphere has suddenly gone see-through. Now when you're submitting this as your demonstration, you need to make sure that I can see that it's see-through, but not so it's disappeared, because otherwise I can't see the object. So pick a value that you're happy with, which you think, yeah, that will work. So there we go. So we can see our transparent object. Just to confirm it is transparent, we can move it over either, and we can see in both the scene view and the game view that they overlap quite happily. So there we go. Now you've also been asked to create a bump specular surface. Now a bump specular allows you to bring in something known as a normal map, and this allows you to start adding texture to what would otherwise be a flat surface with very little processing overhead. Now for this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trundle off to the internet, and I just searched in Google floor texture with normal. And what this allows me to do, I've gone into this website here, you can go to whichever one you want, but you're looking for something which gives you both the normal map and the texture. So if I go and open this zip file, which I've just downloaded, what you can see in here is, thank you, the color map, which shows the texture for the floor, but you can also see the normal map, and this is what gives it texture. So what we're going to do, we're just going to extract both of these, and if we just locate it on the hard drive, my documents, oh heck, where has it saved it? Haha, good-o. Right, hang on, let me just find where my project is stored. So if you come back to Unity, probably a good thing to do at the moment, if you right click in your project, create a new folder, I'm going to call this scenes, because you need to save your scene. So we're going to go File, Save Scene As, and then we can have a look at this path. So for some reason, this is Save C, Users Public Documents, for some reason it's gone into the public. Oh well, such is life. But you can see here we've got our scenes folder and our materials folder as represented in the project. So we're just going to call this Coursework 1 and save. And now I know where it's stored. Let's go and extract these to C, Users Public. What a silly place to go. Public Documents, Unity Projects, there we go. And there's our Coursework 1 folder. And then if you go into the Assets folder, again you can see our materials and scenes, but we're going to want a new folder in there, so we're going to call it Textures. And all we're going to do is extract to that folder. So once that's extracted, we'll come back here. You can see we've now got the Textures folder. If we open that up, we can see the two files, the normal map and the color map. So coming back to materials, what we're going to do is create a new material. This one we're going to call Floor BS, Bumped Specular. And the reason for that, the shader we're going to choose is Bump Specular. So we're going to actually get some texture while still being slightly shiny. So in here, now we have our texture bases. We can click Select and select, say, the texture. And as you can see, it represents, and we can see it's nice shiny sort of wood floor. We can change how shiny the wood floor is. But we're also wanting to give it some texture, so let's go into our normal map and select our alien carving, and now you can see that we've actually picking up on the edges here. Now you may come up saying this texture map is not marked as a normal map. That's very easy, just click Fix Now, and now you can see here's our textured flooring. Even though it's a flat surface, we have this texture, and we can change how shiny it is anyway. So what we're going to do, we're just going to drag and drop that onto floor BS onto the plane. Now it's quite a large texture, so what we can do is we can tile it. So let's give it 3 of those across its length and height, and let's tile that again 3 by 3. Maybe 3 is too much, let's stick it at 2. So we now get the texture unwrapped twice on that surface. So that's quite cool. But we're still missing a couple of things. So also you've been asked to bring in some lights. So we're going to get some lights for ourselves. So game object, let's create an empty game object. Let's stick it at 0, 0, 0. And we're going to call this one lights. And all we're going to do in this lights one is create other, so game object create other, and we're going to choose ourselves a directional light. Now you see it's lit everything quite happily, and a directional light, you can swing the light around in real time and see it reflecting and updating in the view. But a directional light is kind of boring, so let's just get rid of the directional light and let's put in a point light. A bit more interesting. So it started it for some reason in the middle of nowhere, so let's put it back to 0, 0, 0. Now if we just lift this point light up, you can see how it's affecting the scene. If we rotate the scene around, you can have a look at exactly how it's affecting. Now the point light has a couple of settings. So you've got the colour of the light. Let's change that to pink, no, bright green, there we go. We've got intensity, so how bright is that light, so you can turn it right down or turn it up. And you can also change its range, so let's drop that down to 5 and reduce its range slightly. Now with much like the other objects, we can move this around in the scene, we can lift it up, we can bring it forward and back, and depending on the materials in the scene, so you can see this the blue slightly reflective material even though it's translucent. You can also see it reflecting off the green material, and then red, well the red cube's just a dull cube, so it's not really reflecting that much, so we're going to put a light there. But we can also do another light. What we can do, create other, let's stick a spotlight in, why not? So grab that and bring it up above the plane, so spin that around, have a better look at it. Now that is a little bit boring, it's not very useful as a light, so let's increase our spot angle so we can have a better spotlight, maybe bring it down a touch, and just boost up the intensity a little bit. Now let's also change the colour. I don't know, let's have a nice bright yellow light. Now the reason I'm asking you to bring in 2 different types of light is then I can see how you've actually integrated them and put them into the scene. I can also see the difference visually between a spotlight and a point light. If you start sticking in more than 2 lights, because the shaders in the free version can only really handle 2 lights simultaneously, you'll start seeing funny effects when you run the simulation. So for this tutorial, let's just stick with 2 lights. Now you're also asked to bring in an FBX file. Now an FBX file is an Autodesk portable exchange format, and you can find FBXs very freely online. So all I did, searched for free FBX files in Google, and I found a minion from Despicable Me, and this website allows you to download models without registering. Other websites ask you to have a free registration to download them, but you can download a number of things. Remember, the heavier and more textured your model is and more vertices, the more complex it is and the longer it will take to import, and it will slow your simulation down. So you're looking for something quite simple for this tutorial, and remember you're looking for a .fbx file. So again, what I've done is I've downloaded this, and I've got my minions.upload.fbx. I've also got a couple other bits like an object file, but I've also got an MTL, which is a material file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract these and find it on the hard drive again. See users, public documents, Unity documents, Coursework 1, assets. Now in here we've got materials, scenes and textures. I'm going to create another folder called FBX. You could call it meshes, whatever you want. So we're just going to extract that to there, and if we come back to Unity, we'll now see A, we've got this new folder, and B, you'll see that Unity will then import the asset. So if we now open up our FBX folder, we can see the various files in there, and there we go. Here's our little minion chap. So he's all ready and happy, good to go, and all we're going to do is drag and drop him into our hierarchy. Now, where did he go? Well, he's there. He's tiny. For some reason, he's really small. So what we're going to do is just delete him. Whilst we're here in the hierarchy, probably a good idea to also drag and drop the lights into the lights game object that we created. This means that we can grab that and move both lights at the same time. So, coming back, now why did our minion come in so small? The reason is, by default, the FBX import scale is 0.01. So if we change that to 1 and hit apply, and then drag him into the scene, whoa, now he's far too big. So you can play around with your import settings. But remember, you've also got the ability to scale within Unity, so let's make him a fifth of the size. Little fat minion. There we go. So we now have our minion. We can rotate him, much like any other game object. We can position him in the scene. Let's have him standing over there. We can put him through the floor if we so wished. Let's try and get him to stand on the floor a bit. So if we zoom in and rotate around, let's have a look. Is he stood on the floor? He looks pretty damn close. So there we have our minion standing in our scene, and that's how you import an FBX file. Now, last thing to think about is camera position. So when we started, our main camera was just at 1 - 10, but we might want to think about moving that around a bit to get a different view. So if you have a look at the game view at the bottom, you can see how moving this camera about actually affects what's being displayed, and have a look at your transparent material there so you can see light coming through. Now, cameras, like any other game object, can be rotated, they can be positioned, they can be maneuvered about wherever you want them to go. So you just keep playing with them until you get them into a position you're happy with. Once you're happy with something, then just remember, save your scene. Now, where to go next? We've got our plane, we've got our 3 objects, we've got our FBX, we've got our 2 lights, we've got our bump specular, our dull, our shiny, and our transparent textures. But now you need to get these files output in a way that I can view them and actually give you a mark. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to File, Build Settings, and in Build Settings it's asking you which scenes you want to build, and this will become more important later on when you've got multiple projects running at the same time. If you click Add Current, that adds the current scene into the build. So you see scene/coursework1.unity, and that's out of my scenes folder. And then you get the platforms that you want to deploy to. Now in this case we're going to deploy to PC, Mac and Linux standalone. You could deploy to a web player if you're wanting to embed this in a web page, iOS, Android, Windows Phone, even PS4 if you so wished. And now we're going to, as I say, use PC, Mac, Linux standalone. We've got our target platform Windows. If you are compiling on Linux or on Mac, please make sure you select this as Windows, otherwise I'm not going to be able to look at your project. Architecture, leave that as x86. Reason for that is Unity is natively 32-bit. Unity 5, which will be coming out in a couple of months, hopefully will be 64-bit natively, but for this, keep it at x86, and then just hit build. What this will ask you to do is, where do you want to save this? So we're going to call our application Coursework1 and give it your username, just so I know who you are, and then your name. Simple as that. Hit save. And what that will now do is it will take all of the assets, such as the FBX and all of the different objects you put in and the textures, and compress this all down to a single executable with a assets folder. So what you can see is it's just processed everything, and now what it's done, depending on your version, it will pop up the folder, and here you see your application Coursework1, VIS, my username, my name, but you also get this folder, Coursework1, matching the name exactly _data. Now it is essential when you're uploading things to Blackboard to make sure you put this and this in the same zip file, because if you don't, I'm not going to be able to actually that one. I'm not actually going to be able to see what you've done. If you just send me the application, that's not going to contain enough information for me to actually load what you've done. So here you can see a zip file or a RAR file, some form of compressed format with both in. Now, if we double click on this application, you'll get the Coursework1 configuration, because that's what we called the scene, pop up, we've got our graphics and input. This you can play around with later. But here we've got our screen resolution. I think for the time being I'm just going to have it 800 by 600 windowed. I'm going to have fantastic display quality. I'm going to display it on 1:1. I'm going to hit play. As you can see, 800 by 600 window as expected, and here is my game. So very simple, very easy. There is your tutorial scene, and then that is what I'm wanting you to send me. So I want you to send me your exe and your data folder, because then I can see that you've actually gone and imported stuff. Now don't copy my example exactly. I want to see some originality. Go off. There's thousands and thousands of FBX models out there, millions of textures. Go off, have some fun, enjoy yourself, and I'll look forward to seeing the results.